We have taken sustainability into account since the very beginning. So we are proposed to use this technology on a very high passage. So there was this platform where every time somebody would walk on it, it would produce energy. And this energy could be used inside the office. So we were like, the client really loved the idea, and we were like really serious about implementing this in our project. But then we realized that the effort that it would take to have this sustainable technology was massive, was just out of control.
The materials we use, the forms that we see every day, the culture that we live. A simple example is bringing in a courtyard into a space. It's so important. It's so, for us, it used to be a community space, in a house, but that can translate into an office space. You can have a central courtyard which functions as a community space.
If it's an oil and gas company, it changes drastically. When it's a tech company, it changes. Versus when you're actually dealing with a different set of company, all their setups are different.
The most defining point in my journey was when I moved to India from Europe, which was about 10 years ago. Because it kind of forced me to readapt to a new context. I came here and everything was different. The culture, the society, the project, different scales, different environment, different expectations. So it really forced me to readapt.
We need to have an ecosystem of local architects, because they know the local context really well. Culture, understanding people are very important, right? It's not about just a certification which talks about, yeah, this is well, or this is LEED certified, or all that perspective. But most importantly, it's about what is the local context.
We need to focus on quality, delivering quality with consistency. That's what will take India to play with a major international player in the market.
I think both my colleagues are right that in every sense we need a little bit of a push and a drive. We are creative. We have the creative part of it. We're moving towards a very human-centric design right now, and I think that's also very important for us to cater to, and that's where the local context is very important, with the global precision and the global, I would say, knowledge sharing that comes in.
You open a ChatGPT bot, a tool, and you sort of put in a question. There's so much of power consumption that's happening, right? And while you're working on a data center, what's important is the PUE, right? How much of power is basically, how efficient your power usage is. So that was one of the key asks.
Good evening, everyone. I'm really glad to be moderating this panel of wonderful panelists who are influential design leaders and brilliant creative minds on this pressing topic of scaling sustainability, how MNCs can lead real change. So, being an environmental engineer and sustainability professional, I would like to begin by sharing some of the facts that would be more relevant to the context of sustainability and construction scale. So, we often hear that construction industry plays a substantial role in global carbon emissions. Nearly 40% of the global emissions come from construction. It includes both operational emissions and embodied emissions, though the buildings occupy less than 2% of the land mass on the earth, but the impact is really huge. Coming to India, the building and construction sector accounts for 32% of the total national GHG emissions inventory. Nearly 500 million metric tons of embodied emissions are because of materials that we are using in the construction. just to give you the context of construction that is happening in India, in 2005, 1.9 billion square meters of constructions had happened. Right now, if we look at the rapid pace, by 2030, it is going to reach 9.6 billion square meters. So we are growing by 5 times in 25 years. In addition to that, 90% of India's existing buildings were built only after 1990s. So that is the massive construction that is happening in India. And India contributes to more than 30% of global construction waste. So without further delay, I'll get on to the panel discussion. I'll begin with Shilpa. So, we would like to understand your professional journey. So, what were some of your defining moments or turning points that shaped your journey, especially being an architect and you are also associated with impactful projects? So, if any of the audiences would like to understand how your guiding map looks like, so could you please share some lights on that?
Quite an interesting question, Sandhya. This sort of there's multiple stories while we sort of took off this journey of sustainability, and there are two quick stories that sort of comes to my mind. Before I sort of get into a story, we sustainability is not a department for us. It's actually an initiative which sort of works with a cross-functional team. So while we are doing any project that we're working on, right from the concept stage itself, the whole integration of sustainability comes into play. To go back to the journey, how we imbibed into it, it was basically, we were working for a client who, who was asking us to propose a data center project, right? And today, if you see, most of the power consumption actually happens from there. Like you open a chat GPT a tool, and you sort of put in a question, there's so much of power consumption that's happening, right? And while you're working on a data center, what's important is the PUE, right? How much of power is basically, how efficient your power usage is. So that was one of the key asks. And the client asked us, saying that what is Zyta doing to ensure that we are to take the step towards environment. So that was like a spark. And then second thing was that at the same time we were sort of I was reading this book called Ecology of Commerce, and these two things sort of connected really well. And we sort of felt how for a data center, how do we sort of start off with getting sustainability, because you're talking about a built environment, a building that's already built in, and how do you sort of imbibe sustainability in that perspective. And this was the key start for our journey. And every day we are learning. Every day is a new learning for us. Yeah.
Luca, you would like to answer the same question?
So I think the most defining point in my journey was when I moved to India from Europe, which was about 10 years ago, because it kind of forced me to readapt to a new context. I came here and everything was different: the culture, the society, the project, different scales, different environment, different expectations. So it really forced me to readapt, understanding and learning from a new context. It definitely taught me to be more flexible in the way I do even my everyday life, not only just my professional journey. So I think that was the question. That's definitely the most defining moment of my professional journey so far.
Aarti, how about you?
Been in this industry for 20 years. But when I moved here to Bangalore 20 years ago, actually 25 years, but I moved to Bangalore 20 years ago, and my first project was a very large scale project, 550,000 square feet. And I jumped right into it. it had a LEED Gold certification that we were working on, and that's where I started realizing, and I started getting into the whole sustainability thing. But I'll fast forward to 2019, where I started working on a project which was a consolidation project, again a very large scale project, and we were able to achieve optimization in labs by infrastructure, the power consumption, and also in terms of how we were able to use 40% of inventory that the client had. It's a LEED Platinum project, but the way we were able to use materials, local materials, source materials which are closer to Bangalore, um, and the way the team worked on getting this is something that helped me understand how this has been and how important it is for us to be working towards a more sustainable goal.
Yeah, lovely to hear those things. So, we have often seen that major Indian infrastructure projects are led by, say, multinational companies or uh, MNCs are doing that, not the Indian based architecture firms. So, if we need to dream of Indian architecture firms becoming a global player like that, what would it take for them to reach there? Do you see small architecture firms tackling local architectural issues, or big MNCs would be taking part in larger infrastructure projects in the coming years? What are your thoughts on these things?
I think
No, no. Okay.
uh, I think we've already embarked that journey in terms of the fact that uh, we need to have an ecosystem of local architects because they know the local context really well. Culture, understanding people are very important, right? It's not about just a certification which talks about, yeah, this is well or this is LEED certified, or all that perspective, but most importantly it's about what is the local context, how are things used, right? And I think if you talk about it from the first move advantage, India is done massively well. Uh, the way Tata is actually sort of using hydrogen to produce steel, right? That initiative, Mahindra for the EVs, or rather Pune and Indore being one of the largest circular economy where the solid waste has been converted into power. So there are lots of first mover advantage we are taking in as India, and I think uh, yeah, and also I see there is a lot of investment that's happening from the perspective of research and all of that. And you know uh, I, I I think we have taken the path. It's not too far away. It's just that we in India, I think it's more about lacking of documentation. I think that's something that if we sort of improve, yeah, we are pretty much there. Yeah. That's my perspective.
Yeah. Luca, you have any different perspectives?
No, I agree. We already taken the path. I really think that we need to focus on quality, delivering quality with consistency. That's what will take India to play with a major international player in the market. And yeah, just focusing on delivering quality. Local reality are great, to tackle local issues, understanding the local people, and really experiment a little about the creativity. But yes, international firms can really take things a little on a higher level and take that experimentation on a scale, on a bigger scale. So I think the moment that we focus on quality and consistency and having a strong process in place, India can definitely reach that place and inspire other countries as well.
Arti, you represent Gensler and you would have been part of such large projects. So, what are your thoughts?
I think there's a lot to learn on both sides. It's not there's a lot that the larger firms bring to India in terms of delivery, in terms of being able to give uh, solutions which are precise. Uh, and then Indian firms also have the capability. So it's both sides where Indian firms have the capability of upscaling. I think both my colleagues are right that in every sense we need a little bit of a push and a drive. We are creative. We have the creative part of it. We're moving towards a very human centric design right now, and I think that's also very important for us to cater to, and that's where the local context is very important, with the global precision and the global I would say knowledge sharing that comes in. So for us at Gensler, it's been a great journey because we do have the philosophy of a global and local context. So it's a global to local context. So we bring in the global with with leveraging of the local context. So it's been great, and I think it's possible. I mean, everything's possible.
Yeah, interesting perspectives.
That's that's the key thing, right? Uh, Hardworking people and things are possible. That's the key context for driving anything big. While a international company brings in standardization, they get in the process in place. So a good collaboration is a key to uh, is a key to bringing new initiatives, and especially in sustainability, because we are still sort of evolving and developing that part of it. Yeah.
Okay. So, we would have read more about sustainable cities designed around the world, be it Masdar city in Abu Dhabi or many other European cities. They had an intention of being sustainable or zero waste, zero energy, but they haven't accomplished those goals yet. They are still on their way to achieve those things. Having said that, I would like to understand your views. We if we are working on a larger project, do you think is it practical to implement sustainable strategies in Indian context? Is it doable? What are your thoughts?
Absolutely, it's 100% doable. Uh, I think it's more to do with, uh, you know, what are, like, say, small examples would be, your district cooling, or, if it's a large scale project, renewable energy, how we can incorporate them, and all of that. So, there are various means, and the answer to your question is yes, Sandhya. That could be incorporated.
Yeah, definitely they have to, especially when it comes to big scale projects. Big scale project has a bigger impact. But I think it makes sense if we start at the very beginning, taking care of the sustainability matters. So not just an add-on in the end. Okay, like just as a checklist. Okay, we just paid some money and we got on board a consultant and he gave us a certification. I don't think that really makes sense. But if it's part of your journey from the very beginning, choice of material is driving your concept, then it makes sense. So yeah, definitely we are responsible for that because we are shaping the infrastructure. We are designing spaces which are used by people every day for 8 10 hours a day. So we have a big responsibility here.
Aarti, you
I
want to
agree.
add?
Um, I agree, and there are two parts that I feel are important. One is at a master plan level, or even at cities level. There's a lot of infrastructure that goes in. It does come with its own challenges of cost, time, and there's a lot that goes into being truly sustainable. Um, but it's possible. It takes a little bit of an effort for us to move a mountain. Um, in projects, again, it's the same thing. You start with at the master planning level with rainwater harvesting. How are you able to plan for waste? How are you able to manage the facades? How is that so important? How are you avoiding heat gain? What is it? How do you get HVAC costs down in terms of the operation cost, right? Uh, I think part of this also we need to consider is that we need to educate our clients. We need to tell our clients that you're going to be spending a little more during the expenditure or the budgeting of the project, but it's going to give you greater returns. And I think that is something that if we are able to, as design, as subject matter experts, if we are able to do that, it'll help take this goal to a larger and a longer. I think
Very interesting.
output.
Yeah. So many sustainability strategies look good on papers, but we would face a lot of roadblocks on our way. So I would like to give one small example what we have done at Space Matrix. We have taken up sustainable construction waste management initiative. So we partnered with agencies who can do it for us. But at times we have seen that there are challenges, very basic challenges as regulations, which are not clearly laid out. The things are not in black and white, or we are not able to utilize the existing ecosystem. So such barriers do come ahead of us. But finally, we should aim for a larger impact and we have to scale up our efforts. So that's where I think such efforts would need a push. So I would like to understand from you, are there any real examples where pursuing sustainability required out of the box thinking, or um, any uh, any other difficult decisions that you had to take? Uh, if you have any examples that you would like to share.
Um, uh, Basically, in terms of the fact that how do you sort of ensure that you have the right you have right construction ability that sort of comes in. So some of the initiatives that Zaita has taken up is uh, firstly is in terms of technology adoption. BIM is something that we've done for ourselves. So right from uh, the designing to our rendering to approvals, and also BOQs are all derived from that. So a biggest saving would be that you're not pumping up your quantities, right? Because you're not ordering extra. So one of the initiative was that, and that something was very in-house, and and it is, when things are in-house they are controllable, but when it goes out, it just becomes non-controllable, because you'll have to figure out that your products that are at the product that are using, and the waste products that are you want to send back to the factory, sort of make it as a pallets, or give it to any factory for making tissues or combs or whatever of that sort. Are the entire supply chain enabled to ensure that the product is going to the right place? Is it not going to a dump yard? So these are few of the challenges that we sort of face in, right? And there is a tracking mechanism that says that yes, the material is moved out, the material is reached out to this factory. Now there are the glasses that are waste products that are unused material that's going back, and they are creating small pellets sort of it, and then it could be used in other glass companies to make light fixtures. How is the end product coming in? So sometimes we do not get clarity on that, and but you're promising, you're committing your client, saying that our construction is going to be of zero waste. How do you ensure that things are happening? So these are some challenges that we sort of feel, and tracking the entire perspective, right from the time it's sort of left out to the side till the time it's out in the market as another product. I feel there is a massive gap there, and that's something that we are trying to see how we can ensure that the entire supply chain is properly tracked up.
If you ask me an example, I can think of one of the projects we have worked just after COVID. So we have taken sustainability into account since the very beginning. So we are proposed to use this technology on a very high passage. So there was this platform where every time somebody would walk on it, it would produce energy. And this energy could be used inside the office. So we were like, the client really loved the idea, and we were like really serious about implementing this in our project. But then we realized that the effort that it would take to have this sustainable, technology was massive, was just out of control. The technology was coming from America, and it was a huge amount of people that was required for the installation. So it was a massive effort. So we stepped back and we kept it simple. We kept it honest. So that's a compromise we had to do when it came to sustainability.
Ati, you have any other views?
Uh, I think we've had a couple of instances where Gensler's reaching or committed to being uh, in the summit in Dubai recently. Our management has committed to being a net zero by 2030. So we are really working towards that. What we are pushing internally is that everyone, all of us, have some sort of accreditation or rather certification, Fitwell, wellness, lead. That's something so that we start looking at design as an internalized thing that comes out. So it starts at the center, and then it's not just towards a certain aid, location, or I would say at a moment in a project. But we've taken critical decisions where a client said, "Oh, this is expensive." We said, "No, you will need it because you have a glass building. You have the opportunity to tell the builders that we need a DGU glass, which is going to reduce the light, the sunlight coming in, also the operation cost or keeping the cool the interiors cool." So that's also something that we were able to do, and the budget came out of the interiors. So it's not easy, but you take decisions and you figure out a way to manage these costs and figure out how best you can do. Buy local, again, give a push to furniture manufacturers who are local rather than shipping it all the way from Europe and China, and that's a lot of carbon footprint. So we're taking those steps and we've been able to achieve that to a certain degree, but I think we're reaching that point.
How is it like dealing with Fortune 500? I'm sure all of you have been part of such projects, and it would be little different from designing, but also the processes that you have to follow to complete the design. So, what are your experiences having?
You can't hear me? Oh, perfect. Okay. Oh, okay. Now it's better, right? Thank you. Uh, Fortune 500 companies, I think it's smooth because uh, the reason being is they have standards, they have their processes. Uh, the, you need to bridge that, and your alignment towards what their needs are and what solution you can provide, that should be there. Because I think the key is communication and the shortest path of communication there, which makes a big impact. Because the moment you're able to communicate, you're able to tell your challenges, and also the fact that you're able to align to their sustainability process, or their goals of their initiatives. I think it's not complicated, and every time you're catering to a different client from, and it changes. Say for example, if it's an oil and gas company, it changes drastically. When it's a tech company, it changes, versus when you're actually dealing with a different set of company. All their setups are different, right? uh, all it requires is the right solution, and for that the alignment and ask is required. Yeah, so it's not complex.
Okay.
So at Ultra Confidential, actually, we do smaller projects, smaller scale. We work on boutique projects, so we don't deal with Fortune 500 projects. But it's interesting to see on a smaller level that we have similar struggles, challenges, and it's quite similar.
I think dealing with Fortune 500 clients, there's a very simple answer that I've found is they need transparency. They need they need their standards for them standards are important, and how that translates. Again, it's the 80-20 rule. So 80% of their spaces are global standards. How does that come into the Indian context is something that's very critical for them, and we have to be transparent about it. Most of our clients on the global side, we need to we work with them. They look at us as their channel partners. They look at us as consultants who are able to guide them. So that's why the transparency is very important. And then managing the teams that are in India and working with the teams that are in India, that's where the localization comes in. So it's very important to manage both, and both require a different set of, I think, working. But it's interesting. So yeah, it would be
Yeah,
interesting.
I also have seen that Fortune 500 companies in the last 5 years, they have started pledging for net zero and these things. So their pre-qualification criteria has become more stringent.
Yes.
They would ask, if you have your climate commitments, then only you can work with us. So that is one of the things that I thought of highlighting here.
Yeah, we've recently worked with a client where we couldn't use certain refrigerants, and it was in their global guidelines, and the consultants had to make sure they're on top of these things, which are just so important to them. So even materials, anything that doesn't have a sustainable or a renewable or specification that it is a renewable or recyclable product is a no-no. So we have to be on top of that to make sure that you're able to give them that commitment and that output.
So moving on to the digital tools and the decisions that we can rely on because of the digital transformation. So I'm sure all of you are embracing new technologies in your design processes, and they would give you much better insights even before you start the construction. So, what were your experiences based on such analysis? Maybe I'll start with one example. Few years ago, when we were working on a build to suit project, the base building layouts came to us, and then we conducted a preliminary assessment, and we realized that the building would perform better if we rotate the building by 180 degrees. That would give us 5% energy savings or 20% daylight penetration into the building. So it took uh, some efforts for us to go back to the builders and the clients. We made sure that that decision was considered, and they were able to integrate that because it was a early design stage analysis. So likewise, if you have any different experience based on such analytical tools that you have worked on any projects, we would love to hear that.
Uh, s- so at Zyta, our base tool is BIM, Building Information Modeling. Uh, and alongside with that, there are several other tools like, you have Enscape, which talks about the fact that how the building envelope is, sort of interfering with thermal analysis, your lighting part of it, all of that. While you're actually also sort of, right now, when you talk about spaces, everything is sort of, clients are talking about cloud setup. So server rooms are not that large, that like the way it used to be. But when you have specific requirement like data centers or larger server spaces, we have tools called CFD analysis, where you're talking about how the circulation of air is happening into the into the racks. How you have segregated, hot aisle containment, or rather a hot aisle or a cold aisle containment. How the segregation is happening. Apart from that, I think, yeah, mainly I think the simulation that sort of happens through BIM is massive. You talk about it in terms of thermal daylight. You talk about it from conflict detection. All of it is all embedded together, and we are like a BIM native company, and that's sort of given us a lot of insights in terms of the fact that if you use a product which is and also apart from that, we using something called one-click LCA, uh, on which you can actually audit your performance of your materials, right? It's not about just building it up. We are also talking about life cycle management of a product, right? How a product has been used, where it is coming from, what kind of carbon emission it's producing. Also, just not the source one, source two. It's also talking about all the level of source of emission that is generated. So yeah, I think from the sustainability perspective, I think one-click LCA is something that we are sort of incorporating.
So we started using at some point these technology tools which helped us with the sustainability matters, and we could really see the change and the benefit of it. So if we were used to design things in a certain way because it went well in the previous project, and then on the handover day we discovered that a few areas are not lit enough or are not cool enough, or the acoustic is horrible in that corner because it's too crowded. So these are all things that we had to rectify later, and they all became like major snacks to work. And I think from the moment we started to work on acoustic simulation, air conditioning simulation, and lighting also, it really changed the game because we were able to deliver efficient spaces and not just good looking. So yeah, those are great, and we really could see the benefit of using this technology.
Arti.
We've been able to use a lot of technology at Gensler in terms of at the starting where scan to BIM models. They're so important because we've been working on a model that is already created by, probably it's not built the same way. That saves a lot of rework. It also saves a lot of material if something's come to site, quantity variations. Those are the things that can be captured on day one. So scan to BIM models are a big thing. Of course, I know that a lot of builders are also using these technologies where they're getting a better output from this, from the building, from building a mass. For us, again, we've been on the BIM 360 platform, and it's real time. It's also helped us work where the global teams and the local teams work together on that. And that's created a lot of efficiencies, materials, again, putting everything into and taking it to the 19650, the ISO 19650 model, where it can be taken to the FM side of managing a project, not only in terms of how the HVAC is running, but the life cycle and working on materials. What is going to happen? What needs to be changed? Between that, there is also clash detection that we work on. Clash detection is something that helps, I would say, just simply not get into rework at site. It also helps in making sure that the materials that are coming to site are good. So a lot of technologies, and interestingly now we're working on climate and sunlight facade management softwares, which have helped us a lot, where we've been able to make our layouts more specific so that you don't have a lot of sun. A lot of teams complain glare, sunlight. So there's a lot of heat that's been, and we've been able to create certain specific solutions which have a better advantage and leading to better sustainability.
Okay. A few international large-scale firms started designing their own tools to do such assessments and analyses. So, do you think Indian firms can do those things, or do you already know somebody who has done it?
Zaita is doing that. We have our own layout automation tool that's built in-house, that's built by architects who, and because you know the use case, you know how things work. When you're an architect, you can build it well. So we've done our own layout automation tools, stacking, right? Because that becomes a very important perspective in terms of the fact that how functions are placed next to each other, and that becomes a very important perspective for clients. You can literally simulate the entire workflow in terms of the fact that assume that there is a special room placed somewhere else and the team is working somewhere else versus the team is right across the special room. how does the entire collaboration happen? So we've built in tools, and yes, India is no far away from that. A good example is Zaita, basically.
Happy to hear that it's happening in India. We no, honestly, we don't do that yet. But I guess it's amazing because who better than you know the process that you use, the method that you use. So if you're able to develop a software which helps you to that level, that's amazing.
So, is it just for in-house use or?
Yeah, it's currently in-house. We want to sort of, so we want to debug it completely, so that, once we debug it and when customers are coming to buy from us, they have the product which is debugged, and all our layouts pretty much are sort of a byproduct of that. There are a lot of, parameters that we have to put in. It's not idiot proof right now, like any other tool. And I think when you're building a software, it should be idiot proof. It isn't 100% idiot proof, and we're working towards getting that done. And once we feel we could do a small MVP, possibly, yes, it could be out in the market. But right now, it's all internal.
We have a lot of proprietary softwares. Starting from BIM, we have our own plugins. So we've been able to develop that. It's getting developed in India, but then it's a global effort. So yes, I think on one side, I do believe that the technology is going to be very important, and we'll need to make sure that we upscale and make sure that we get the right softwares to help assist us in the output and the work that we are doing. So it's possible, yes.
Great. So, my next question to all of you: how do you see your work impacting not just buildings but also the policies or the mindsets of the stakeholders and even the industry at large?
I would give you my example, right? And when I was a real small child, my grandmom used to tell me, build spaces impact you, right? Psychologically as well. Like if you have environment which is clean around you, uh, you know, you see things very differently, right? You see things very differently, and that's very important. You were mentioning, Luca was mentioning about quality. I think that also sort of starts getting in. If you see the way the roads are, the infrastructure is, for us, the attitude of chalta hai has breeded in, right? And it's small, but it's infrastructure that's impacting. And workspaces, your spaces impact your behavior, impact your creativity, and also impact the way you think. And I think that's super important. And I've also seen that you change cities, you meet new people, your way of interaction changes. You are in a space where we are having an interaction which is like a setup like this, while you're sitting in a boardroom versus you're sitting in an informal space, your ideas changes, right? So yes, it impacts a lot.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with her. So the scale of project that we do is not that big, so we don't have that great impact. But I think as I said before, we design spaces for people to be used every day for multiple hours on a day. So I think if we can do even just a little bit to inspire people and carry on with these practices out of their work life, yes, definitely we can. We have to do that.
I think today's workspace has become not just work. There's a lot more that's part of this whole going to work. You meet colleagues, you take some time off, you need those respite full times in the day. It's a very busy day everyone has. So for us, we've been able to, and we do invest in a lot of research. Gensler invests 18% of their profits back to research. And the research helps us come up with a lot of these insights where how do you make them human centric? So wellness, amenities, uh, community spaces. How do you integrate these spaces into a regular office space? And what are the changes that you see we've been able to speak to clients and get those spaces into our projects, and these are the kind of small changes that have impacted offices and our projects. So yes, it's important to be able to use design and the insight that research also provides us to come to or to be able to give a solution.
What is your thought on corporate design versus soulful design? Can formal offices also be designed as soulful spaces?
Okay. Yes, absolutely. Offices are not formal, right? Uh, and I wouldn't say it's casual. It's informal. There are it's neurodiverse. It's designed for different set of people. You need a quiet space. You need a space where there's a bustling community. You need a space that you want to just lie down and work, and that's what office spaces are. It's not formal. It's never formal. uh, when you have a good blend of all of it is when the whole work environment becomes hyper collaborative, and that's the crux, right? Today if you see any leaders, they have what are their challenges? Their challenges to have the right set of talent, attract the talent and retain the talent, and that's one of the key perspectives of leaders. And once you're attracted the talent, how you're retaining it and how you're ensuring the whole space is productive, how can they do more? And for that, environment like office becomes a very important perspective. Workspace becomes a tool of culture building. Workspace becomes a tool for employee engagement, celebration, all of that, right? And it's I in my last 15 years of career, I don't think so we've done a very formal office apart from being a lawyer's office, which is, but they're also changing now. Yeah.
Yeah, so we had the chance to design offices for many type of industry, beauty brand like Tira, or tech company like Microsoft, or lawyers, bank, and of course this looks more formal. But I would say that there is no like a single project, even the most formal spaces that we design, that doesn't carry a soul. And even if it's just subtle and minimal, and it has more to do with the way the users approach the space and use the space every day. If you are able to understand that, we can say that it has a soul.
I think I gave the answer in my previous one.
Sure.
Yeah.
My last question to all of you. How can well thought Indian identity be a part of formal corporate design? Indian identity, if you want to highlight anything very local or traditional, cultural related, can be part of your formal office design?
There's so many things. The materials we use, the forms that we see every day, um, the culture that we live. A simple example is bringing in a courtyard into a space. It's so important. It's so, for us, it used to be a community space, in a house, but that can translate into an office space. You can have a central courtyard which functions as a community space. So it's not difficult, and I think it's very easy for us to get the Indian context into a global workplace, because the colors that we have, the fabrics that we use, it's an endless list, and I think it's very easily scalable, and I would say contextualizable.
I wanted to hear that because Genster is an international company, and where we bring in the local context a lot. So I wanted to hear that perspective from you. And to your answer, Sandhya, yes, there's a big perspective to it is right from the materiality to the to say a concept where we're talking about getting in artisan coming into the workspace, working with, say, Channapatna toy that could come into a workspace, that could form a logo for them. right? Right from the lantana reeds that is grown in Bandipur, that could be very harmful for the cattle over there if they consume it. How you get that aspect to the workspace, create fabulous design out of it. Like we can make light fixtures, we could sort of put in, ceiling. So then there are a lot of initiatives that we could do from the perspective of going local in the perspective. But yeah, just don't want to make it really loud, subtly imbibing everywhere. So because what's very important, yes, they are in India, but what's also very important that, hey, I am working for this company and that's where I belong and that's the culture I want to breed in. And I know that I have my office in Bangalore. So that's very subtle. So yeah, it's a blend of subtleness of that, and the bigger picture is the bigger layer would be the cultural aspect and the likes of what their standards follow.
Well, at Ultra Confidential, we are famous and known to deliver Western-looking offices. So, but I would say that in all our projects, we always find a way to bring in the local touch, the ethnic touch. As she said, we also work with local artisans. We tied up with artisans in Rajasthan who makes beautiful hand-knotted rugs. Or recently, we just delivered an office where there were no partitions. It was like a completely open space, and we used this jali as a just to create some sort of path. And these jali bricks were done in Dharavi in Bombay. So we always find a way to bring the local touch that comes from the pattern that we use on the fabric, on the furniture, on the walls. So in a very subtle way, what we do that already.
Great. Just to add, in India, people want to be in an office which may be global if you're with a global MNC, a global office with the context of India. So again, you have to kind of what we need to do is bring balance into how how exactly as both of them have kind of also said. Yeah.
Let's move to an interesting rapid fire round with all of you.
We get a coffee hamper also.
Karan. Okay. I'll start with you, Aarti.
Okay.
So, what is harder, managing design or managing deadlines?
I think managing design, it's really hard. But if you're able to manage design, you can manage deadlines.
Great. Yeah. So, if you had to describe your design philosophy in just one word, what it would be?
Human centric. I think we need to be very human centric in our design. We need to make sure that I'm using more words. I'm sorry, but yeah, it needs to be where it's relatable by everyone.
Okay. The one design trend you think is overrated?
Themes. Over theming, yeah. I mean, just following I don't think there's any one that I can place, but it's just going with a theme rather than a deep rooted context, I think.
Precision or creativity? If you had to choose only one to define your work?
It's difficult, but I think creativity, because creativity is not just in design, uh, out of box solutioning, in delivering a project, is also very important. So it's creativity linked to everything.
Moving to Luca. Italy, Switzerland, or India? Which place has shaped your design voice the most? You can be candid here.
Well, definitely India,
Okay.
because I started my journey here 10 years ago. So, and I have only like that much of experience. So, for sure, my design voice was shaped in India.
What word best defines your design style?
I think minimalist, elegant, and thoughtful. So for us, really everything that we design has a meaning, as a purpose. So thoughtful.
Fashion installations or corporate workplaces? Which excites you more and why?
Well, fashion installations are fun, definitely, and look great, but they're temporary and they are superficial. So when it comes to designing offices, really, I don't want to repeat myself, but we really design spaces which are used by people every day. So that's way more.
What's the one thing you always want people to feel when they enter a space that you have designed?
I think inspiring something. So when I walk in a space and it's a beautiful space, I always see something that is inspiring. Furniture, materials, or just overall look great. So I always take my phone and take pictures. So I love when people do that, enter in a project that I design and take pictures of something, a light or a carpet. I always feel happy because we are inspiring.
Moving on to Shilpa. What inspires you more, people or places?
I think it's people, because if there aren't people, there's no purpose for the space. Yeah, because they bring in that vibe. People being vibe.
If Zaita's culture had to be summed up in a single sentence, what would it be?
Freedom with responsibility, and that's what we are. Yeah.
Okay. The most fun moment you have ever had with your team?
Um, our office is fun. So, every moment is fun. Right from the time we're doing the concept to anything, it's a fun space to work. So, while you'll have like a crazy deadline, but from the other side, you'll always hear people laughing and, chatting. It's a fun place to work. I love being there.
Okay. Would you rather design a workspace for 10,000 people or a tiny creative studio for 10 artists?
We design spaces for large clients. So, yeah, my choice would be the 10,000. Yeah.
Sustainability in one word.
It is conscious living. Yeah.
Conscious living, I think that's excellent. Certifications or real impact, what matters more to you?
I would say real impact through certifications. Certifications are important as well to avoid greenwashing.
If every building in India had to adopt one sustainable practice tomorrow, what should it be?
It should be regenerative design concepts that I want to see more of them in the buildings.
Okay, ma'am. What's the biggest sustainability myth you wish you could bust right now?
Okay, sustainability is not an expense. It would be, it should be considered as a strategic investment, like how we would use our money in health insurance premiums to safeguard our future. We won't consider that as an expense, but it would come handy for our future. So,
So we think of it as a necessity.
yeah, definitely.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you to all our panelists for that excellent discussion. I'd now like to open the floor to questions from the audience.
It was really great listening to the panel, but I have a simple and direct question to you guys. Why do you think sustainability as a topic is really a buzzword going on, considering the climate change what we are witnessing as a generation?
Okay. I don't think it is a buzzword anymore. People started looking at it, at sustainability as a strategic um, component in their businesses. So it started giving results, and people are consciously working towards sustainable goals. So I don't think it won't be treated as a buzzword anymore. Anybody has any other?
Yeah, I'll just sort of answer this in a little different way. As we are growing, and the need of power and need of energy is growing equally higher, right? We have limited resources, right? How do you cater to that need, right? Uh, we need to have consciousness in the way we sort of imbibe things, and that's the reason why sustainability is come into play. It's not a buzzword. It is something that is going to get over in a short span, and how do you ensure that it doesn't replicate, it doesn't die very soon, and we have it left for our children as well. And that's the reason why it is important.
I'm going to add a small thing. It may have been a buzzword some time ago, you're right. Uh, but we are all, I think we've been borrowing a lot from our generations to come, and we need to stop doing that, which is why we are looking at how are we able to do um, zero waste, CHG. That is a big thing right now. Climate action is really important, and how is it that we are able to work towards it? Which is why we also need to factor in that be Indian, be local, be local. Not maybe Indian is yes the right context also, but we need to be very conscious of being local. Not use furniture that's coming in. I love saying that because I feel that we have so much of talent here. Can we upscale firms to provide for things? So there is a way using of roads. I think there was a development on using plastic waste in laying roads. And I think it's a brilliant idea. So we do need to look at this in a larger scale. And it's no longer a buzzword. It becomes something that everybody truly needs to believe in. Use less of Swiggy, I'm guilty. Less of Blinkit, I'm guilty. But I'm trying. So I think it's important for us to be a little more passionate about it, and take care of that a little bit more.